Okay, so today what we are going to be discussing are what I call the three gates. And I've got a Giphy here on the right hand side of Aragorn busting through some gates here in Lord of the Rings from the Two Towers. And really, why I am making the analogy to busting through gates is because the whole process of finding a role, whether it's tech sales or any high paying role where you're, really going for it and looking to get that money, looking to get that pay, looking for a good career path. The reason why I compare it to Lord of the Rings and busting through gates a little bit is because it is, in fact, a journey. And in this journey, in this quest, you are going to come across a few obstacles. And so, if I can prepare you ahead of time by letting you know about what these obstacles are going to be, what they're going to look like, and how you can combat them, then you're more likely to succeed and actually complete this quest and get that high paying offer that you're looking for. What ends up happening for a lot of people is that they grossly underestimate what this process, what this journey looks like. And they end up taking the whole thing a little bit too personally. They end up getting discouraged and then they end up quitting. And so, what's the point of going through this whole process if you're going to end up quitting anyway and not getting anything you want? Which in this case, what I'm assuming is money, getting paid, getting in a healthy career path that is going to put thousands of dollars in your bank account every single month, every single year for hopefully several years to come. So, really, that's what the goal of this presentation here is all about. I want to let you know about the demons that are going to be kind of coming at you and how can you defeat them? How can you come out winning? And how can you come out more enabled? And so that's really what this presentation is about. So let's go ahead and get started. So the three gates. What am I referring to when I talk about gates? Really what I'm saying is you're gonna come across these three obstacles in every interviewing process. Everyone goes through this. I really want to iterate that this is nothing against you. This is something that every candidate must battle, and every candidate does go through. The key point here is that everyone kind of goes through it a little bit differently. Some folks get through these gates faster, other people go slower. Don't worry, as long as you as long as you acknowledge that it's going to happen and you know it's coming, you're going to be in a pretty healthy spot mentally. And so that's really what the goal here is. Again, I just want to bring awareness to you so that you know what's coming so that you can beat it. And so really these are the three gates that everyone goes through throughout the interviewing journey. It's presentation, competitiveness, and culture fit. So let me go into each one briefly, and then here on the bottom side, I'll be telling you how you can combat these gates, these challenges, and get through them so you can get to the next level in your journey, right? Which is hopefully getting that offer. So presentation and getting into state. What does that mean? What I mean here is that in the early phases, in the early stages of interviewing, you're starting to apply, you're starting to get email responses back to your applications and resume, and you're starting to land your first series of interviews. What'll likely happen to you is that you're going to be super rusty. Interviewing is a skill, it's a muscle. And so if you haven't done it in a long period of time, it's not going to come natural to you. You will fumble over your words. You will feel weird or anxious or embarrassed in your interviews. You won't tell your stories or answers as best you could, and you feel it. You're like, damn it, I knew I could have said that better. I wish I could go back in time and give them this answer instead. You know, this is all part of how you come across. Your presentation in the early phases is going to be pretty weak, and that's okay. That's very normal. For me, I've been in the tech industry for almost 10 years now, almost a decade. And when I get back into interviewing mode and job hunting mode, uh, I am also rusty. It takes me a while to get back into it. Now, of course, my ramp period is way shorter. I get back into the groove real quick. But for a lot of people listening to this video, I'm assuming that you haven't taken an interview in a year, maybe 6 months. And furthermore, you've never interviewed for a tech sales role. You've never interviewed in the tech industry. Maybe you're coming from a completely different space or industry. And if that's you, you're definitely going to feel that anxiety or pressure in these interviews because you really haven't interviewed for this type of role before. And so that's going to be an obstacle that you're going to face, which is, just getting into state, getting into the groove. And so a lot of companies are going to likely pass you up and not move you forward through the initial stages, at least as at first, simply because you're still getting warmed up. And so I have an answer to that, and I'll get into it in a minute. The second gate that people get into is competitiveness and skill set. So after you get the initial rust out of the way, you're starting to get into your groove, you're starting to get into a positive momentum state through interviewing. You're still going to struggle, but the struggle is going to be different. Now, at this point, I expect you to actually be pretty good at interviewing, but nonetheless, this second obstacle you're going to face is your competition. There's going to be other candidates here that you're going up against who truly do have better qualifications than you. And there's almost nothing that you can do about this. They have actual sales experience. They already come from this tech sales industry. Maybe they've got, a better education than you. They went to an Ivy League. You didn't even go to college. There's all different kinds of scenarios that can play out where someone shows up and they're just better than you, and not only are they better than you, but they present themselves well. They just get it. So these are folks that you are going to be competing against. How can you beat them? I'm going to get into that, but you should be prepared for this. This is going to happen. This is a reality. And so just be prepared for it. I'll tell you how in a second. The last piece here is culture fit. Personally, I find this one to be the most annoying and really the most difficult, quote unquote, boss or challenge. This is like the final boss before you get that offer, right? If we're talking about video games, we're talking about quests, we're talking a lot about Lord of the Rings here. This is the final boss, culture fit. And really what this means is that, okay, great. You show up to the interviews, you're doing a great job, you're explaining your qualifications well, you're selling yourself really well. But it might turn out that even then, you're just not a good culture fit for the company. It turns out that they're looking for a different type of persona, a different type of candidate, a different type of personality. And that's okay. Every sales organization, every tech company is a little different. They all have their own culture, their own set of values, their own mission. And so they're trying to attract a certain type of person because that type of person is going to blend in really well with their culture and thrive. And so companies have gotten really good at identifying who's going to be a culture fit and who is not. I can't tell you the amount of times that I've been rejected where I'm like, wow, I absolutely crushed that interview. I crushed that entire interview process. I went through all the stages and I felt like I knocked it out of the park at every step of the way. And then I get to the final interview and I get no offer. And usually it's because it's not a culture fit. And so these companies have gotten really good at vetting for that. And looking back, for me, when I was rejected from those companies, yes, it hurt. I took it personally. I felt disempowered. I felt discouraged. But in the end, looking back, I realized it was actually a God. It was a godsend. I I realized that I never actually would have fit into that company, and I realized that because I end up actually going and chatting with a few friends who work there, or I end up reading some of the reviews, or a really bad story comes out about their organization, and I'm like, holy shit, I dodged a bullet. I would have never thrived there, and so these culture fits, this vetting process through that companies do for culture fit is actually, in my opinion, really good, because if they turn you away, it really means that you were never going to be a good fit there to begin with. So that's just a little reframe that you can do here. But a culture, if you're not a good culture fit, there's almost nothing you can do. You just keep interviewing until you find a company that you're a good fit for, cultural and personality wise. And so these gates are the three gates that everyone goes through. They do go in this order. The goal here is to not take the challenge of each gate personally. Again, many people become discouraged here, and then they end up quitting when really they were just going through a natural part of the interviewing process, of the job hunting process, and all they had to do was just keep their head up. All they had to do was just take the punch and keep going. It wasn't anything personal. And if they kept going, they could have gotten an offer, but a lot of people quit. And so that's why I'm helping put these in front of you now, so that you see them coming from a mile away, and then you just pass through these gates with ease. And so how can you beat each of these gates? How can you beat each of these quote unquote bosses, right? So the key to beating the presentation and getting into state, and getting into the groove of interviewing again, is to simply get more reps in. Make all the mistakes you can make. Take practice interviews with companies that you're not even fully interested in, just to start getting into the groove of things, and start just making the mistakes. And then through this process of getting more reps, you end up getting into state. You start getting momentum. You start naturally answering questions better because you keep getting the same questions over and over again. That's another thing you'll realize here in the interviewing process, is that all the questions are basically the same. No one is asking crazy questions that are out of the ordinary. Everyone's asking the same set of questions to vet candidates. And I'll go through these set of questions in another presentation, but simply by getting more reps in, you will beat that first challenge. You will get through that first gate of presenting yourself well and getting into state. But again, you should expect to mess up your first few sets of interviews, simply because you're rusty. And by the way, don't even take it personally when you make these mistakes. Like, give yourself grace. If you haven't interviewed in months and you have never interviewed for a tech sales role, it's of course you're not going to perform at your best the first time. And don't quit after a few failures. Just keep, kind of like take it with a self-amused tonality, and then keep going. And now, how do you combat competitiveness and skill set against people who actually do have better qualifications than you? Well, what you want to do is simply answer your questions better, have better stories and examples in your answers. And the way that you do that is through weaving achievements and positive impacts into each of your stories and examples. If you can give answers in a way that provides vivid, glorious stories of previous successes, even if they're small successes, that's okay. But if you can tell your story well, you're going to knock the competition out of the park. Because just because someone comes in and they have better qualifications than you doesn't mean they actually know how to interview and tell their story well. So if you can come in with, let's say, less qualifications, but you can tell your story better, then you will compensate for that lack of qualification that you have, or that lack of skill set. And so I will teach you how to answer the questions. I will tell you the questions that they're going to ask you in a different presentation. But once I give you that information, it's really all about telling your story better than the next person. And if you can do that, you're going to compensate for the lack of skills that you have. And so that's how you beat that gate of, that's how you beat the competition. Lastly, how do you combat the gate of culture fit, where you're just not a good fit for them? The way you combat that is by simply being yourself more. Show up more authentically. Like, come in and actually show your personality and be yourself. The biggest mistake I see people make is that they're actually coming across way too polished and way too reserved. Meaning, like, they come into the interview and they don't even show their real personality. They kind of come across as a robot, a professional robot that's just giving professional answers, and they're not even being themselves. When you get into the groove of interviewing, which again, I will be teaching you all of this throughout the interviewing module, but when you start to get comfortable, you're going to start to show more sides of your personality. And that's a good thing. You don't have to come in here into these tech interviews all like zipped up, suited up, professional. Tech companies tend to be a lot more casual. And so if you can show up more, authentically, yet professional, man, you are going to attract a lot more companies, because what ends up happening is if you come across bland, they just reject you. If you're bland, you're just not even memorable. And so if you can come in hot, sharing your stories, sharing your achievements, having really strong answers to everything, being in state, having that momentum of having several interviews under your belt and showing up authentically, then you will find a lot of companies will find you to be a good cultural fit. They'll be attracted to you. It's kind of like dating. If you can show up on a date and be yourself confidently, you're going to make the other person laugh and they're going to like you. Whereas if you show up reserved, introverted, shy, anxious, you're likely going to repel a lot of people away. And so I want to encourage you, once you feel comfortable and you have a few practice interviews under your belt, I encourage you to show up more authentically, because if you can do that, you're going to attract a lot more companies and they're going to give you the green light and pass you forward into the offer stage. And so again, the most important rule here is do not become discouraged. Everyone goes through this. Everybody. It's a mandatory part of the interviewing process. Think of even the Chads, the folks that are naturally oriented towards sales, or they already, come from sales and they're getting into the interviewing. Those folks, those Chads have to interview too. Those Chads also get rusty. They also have to get back into state. They also have to learn how to present their qualifications in an effective way. Everyone goes through this, everyone. And so I encourage you to, like, just seriously, don't become discouraged. It's all part of the process. Now, I'm going to get into the final slide here in a minute, but I really want to drill this into you. The biggest mindset and the biggest issue to avoid here is underestimating the process. Now, give me 1 second. I'm going to take a sip of water before I get into this one. Okay. The biggest issue to avoid is underestimating. A lot of people really underestimate what it takes to break into a new industry. I imagine a lot of you listening to this, or the majority of you, are not going to be coming from the tech industry. Now, and some of you are. Some of you, many of you are going to be coming from the tech industry, and you will still underestimate the process. You'll get cocky because you have the knowledge of the tech industry. You'll feel that initial cockiness. And you'll come in and you'll be like, yeah, I already know it all. I know the numbers like the back of my hand. I know what they're going to ask me. And you'll still screw up. You'll get lazy and you'll skip steps, or you'll get lazy and not explain yourself well. So everyone goes through this where they underestimate the process and underestimate the journey that they're going to go through to get an offer, to get a higher paying job, to get a promotion. Going back into this, it takes a while to get into your state and find your groove. It takes a while. It takes a few mess ups to get your storytelling right. It takes a few rejections to finally find a company that's the right culture fit for you. And so do not underestimate the process. It will take trial and error. Expect a bit of turbulence. That is okay. And so, even though you're taking this course, and even though I am presenting you with the roadmap, presenting you on how to get from point A to point B, it doesn't just mean the offer is going to land right on your lap. Expect a little bit of challenge. Expect some hustle to get into. There's hustle that's going to go into this. There's going to be some sweat capital that goes into this. So don't underestimate the process, and really give yourself time to get warmed up. And so with that, I really want to outline the right expectations of the journey here. I've personally coached dozens of clients in this, and the fastest journey that I've seen from application to offer stage was 37 days. The average, though, is 90 days. This is the most common. It takes a while. It takes a few weeks. Each gate takes a few weeks. You don't get through each gate in a matter of 1 or 2 days or 1 or 2 interviews. Each gate at minimum takes probably 3 to 4, 5 interviews before you get past it, and then you get into the next gate. And so on average, most people take about 90 days to get an offer that they accept. Of course, this will vary on your work experience and your personality type. Some people are naturals. Some people have the gift of the gab. Some people already come from sales or already come from tech, or they already have a vast network in the tech industry. And so, of course, for those people, those people are going to go through this journey a lot faster. For me personally, after a decade in the tech industry, it takes me about 60 days to find a new role, or get that next role where I'm looking for that promotion. So it does take some time to warm up and get into the groove of things. That is to be expected. I I always laugh when I have clients and they're like, they email me or they send me a message, they send me a DM, and they're like, hey, Pedro, I still don't have an offer. What's going on? And then I go and ask them, well, tell me a little bit about the journey so far. How many applications have you done? How many interviews have you done? How long has it been? They're like, oh, I've done 20 applications. It's only been a few weeks. I'm like, are you kidding me? You've done 20 applications? That's cute. Honestly, that's cute. Those are rookie numbers. Um, and so it just, we really got to have the right expectations here. Again, we're really talking about getting paid well here. We're talking about a career option that's highly lucrative, that's going to pay you for the rest of your life, that's going to pay you good for the rest of your life. Some of you are going to make big commission checks. Um, it it takes a while to land these. It takes a little bit. It doesn't just no one just gets an interview, and in that one interview they get the offer of their dreams. For most people, it takes trial and error. It takes talking to a few companies at minimum. This is common even amongst the most successful executives. The VPs of marketing, the VPs of sales, the chief revenue officers, even CEOs that go from one company to the next. Those CEOs, those high level, high power executives, have to talk to multiple companies and vet out a few different offers before they finally accept the offer that's right for them. And that process can take months. For some people, especially high level people, high level executives, that process can take years. And so I really want you to be reasonable with your expectations of the journey. And so at the fastest, yes, it can take 37 days, but most commonly, it should take about 90 days, give or take, to get an offer that you accept. And then over time, throughout the years, as you pivot, that time will get shorter, but it doesn't necessarily have to take shorter. It should take a while to actually go through the process, vet the offers, and get and accept an offer that you're actually going to be really happy with long term. And so, other pro tips here before we conclude: avoid inconsistency. So once you start the journey, finish it. Keep the momentum going. I don't care if it's only 1 or 2 interviews a week. Ideally it's more than that, but keep the momentum going. Once you get momentum on your side and you start heating up and start getting on fire, you're almost it's almost impossible to beat you. It's hard to stop you. You're gonna get an offer. So avoid starting and stopping. Keep going. Keep the consistency up. There's no reason why you can't do a few applications every single day, take a few interviews every week until you get that offer. So avoid the inconsistency, commit to the journey once you start it. You should be aiming for 3 to 5 interviews per 20 job applications. Any less than that means that your resume needs to be looked at. So if you're not landing any job interviews per 20 job applications, there's something wrong. And you're welcome to message me or DM me on Twitter, DM me on Telegram, whatever it is. Let's look at your resume and see what's going on, because there's a red flag there. But on average, you should expect somewhere around 3 interviews per 20 job applications. That's the sweet spot. If you're getting 5 interviews per 20 job applications, that you're doing great. That's phenomenal. And lastly, most people should expect to do about 3 to 4 batches of 20 job applications before they finally get an offer. So, for example, you should expect to do 20 job applications a week or 20 job applications every 2 weeks, and expect to get 3 to 5 interviews from those 20 applications. Go through the process, receive feedback, and then do another set of 20 applications, and keep doing this cycle until you get an offer. Most people will do 3 to 4 batches of 20 applications. So in total, you should be doing somewhere between 60 to 80 applications, give or take, sometimes maybe even a little bit more. That is to be expected. That is average, and that is normal. Any less than that, and honestly, don't even hit me up for advice. I'm not going to take you seriously. If you come at me and you're like, "Hey Pedro, I've only done 5 job applications, what the heck is going on?" I'm going to laugh at you. Get in there, get into the process. You should at minimum be doing a batch of 20 every 2 weeks. If you've done less than 20 job applications total, or less than a handful of interviews, I'm just not going to take you seriously, because you haven't done enough reps to make any progress. It's like going to the gym and saying, "Hey, I did a few bicep curls. Where are my muscles?" Dude, you did a few bicep curls. What did you expect, man? You gotta keep it up for a few weeks, for a long period of time, to see results. Same thing with the job process here. So expect the average of about 90 days, and more importantly, really expect these 3 gates. They will come. Just know that you have the tools, and you will have the tool set to overcome these, so that you can get into the offer stage and get paid. I hope this helps. Keep me posted with any questions.